Hello, colleagues. I'm just testing my mic to see if this is functioning. Can
Hello,
anybody hear
hi.
me clearly?
Yes,
Yeah,
we can hear you loud clear. Thank you.
you're welcome. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, esteemed colleagues, partners, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Binza Joel, the Parenting for Children in Crisis Coordinator with the Parenting for Life Health, and I'm honored to be your moderator for today's plenary. Welcome back to day 3 of our regional convening in support of parents in the Eastern Mediterranean, Middle East, and North African region. Today, we'll include a plenary panel discussion, questions and deliberations, and a group work opportunity. Before we delve into today's discussion, let's take a brief moment to reflect on the enlightening deliberations from day 1, when we briefly talked about when we delved into understanding the current landscape of parenting. And in day 2, we moved on to discussing moving from evidence, policy to scale. As such, on emerging issues, our journey through the digital age revealed both its merits and challenges, the influence of technology on our children's perceptions, its educational benefits, and the hurdles of maintaining digital well-being became really key. The conversation then transitioned to the resilience of families in the face of emergencies and the vital role of parents as preventive agents in conflicts and displacement contexts. Additionally, we deep dived into the care economy, addressing the societal and economic implications of caregiving roles predominantly assumed by women. One highlight was the critical nature of measurable outcomes. We spotlighted exemplary initiatives from the MENA region, particularly the potential of remote early child education. Morocco's results-driven financing approach further underscored the effectiveness of collaborative efforts in scaling parental intervention. Today's theme, looking ahead to the way forward, shifts our focus to the heart of parenting.
Joel, some of our interpreters are having a little bit hard time to understand with the connection breaking. Do you think you can lean forward to the microphone a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I could do that. Can you hear me now?
Use a headset. Yes, that's a little better. Our AT also says you can use a headset if necessary. Thank you, Joel.
Okay, I can use a headset. It's fine. Let me just do that again then. Can you hear me now? Wonderful. Is this clear? All right. Yeah, I was on today's theme, that is looking ahead to the way forward, which will help us to shift our focus to the heart of parenting interventions, investing, resourcing, and policies, and how to effectively reach parents. It becomes the question, how do we as collectives create a sustainable ecosystem of support? As we all acknowledge, funding and support mechanisms are the backbone of any initiative. Engaging with governments, development partners, philanthropies, and the private sector is not just optional, it is imperative. These synergies dictate how effectively we can scale and sustain parenting intervention. To dissect this further, we are fortunate to have an esteemed lineup of keynote speakers today. And I want to apologize if I don't get the name right, it is not intentional. I want to introduce Alia Al-Rashid, who is the program coordinator at the Bernard Van Leer Foundation at the Jordan office. We have Elan Banin, the policy advisor at the International Rescue Committee and the co-chair of the donor working group for the Moving Minds Alliance. We have Arik Neki, the founding coordinator of the United Nations Sustainable Development Platform. And we have Jamie Gao, who is the global lead on early child development, serving as the Child in Adversity team leader at the United States Agency for International Development. Each speaker will bring a unique perspective, shedding light on how we can collaboratively move forward. I'll give a 2 minutes to each speaker. And without further ado, in the next 7 minutes, the floor is yours, Alan Banning. Thank you for listening. Elana, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Wonderful. Well, good afternoon and good morning, everybody. I am delighted to be here with you today to discuss resourcing parenting interventions and engaging government and the philanthropy sector. I want to start out by saying that there is no better way to move the needle on the importance of parenting, particularly on the difficult topic of financing, if we don't work as a collective, as a community to drive attention and support together. If you all take one thing away from my remarks today, I hope it's that. And I'm positive that we're all in agreement that this issue will affect our future and the future of our children if we don't act now. But I'll use the next 5 minutes or so brainstorming with you all out loud on how we surmount the challenges we face to get there. I have the pleasure of addressing you on behalf of Moving Minds Alliance, as well as wearing my organizational hat at the International Rescue Committee. Moving Minds Alliance works to scale up the financing, policies, and leadership needed to effectively support young children and families affected by crisis and displacement everywhere. I serve as the co-chair of the donor working group, inclusive of many of the organizations present today, such as UNICEF, Save the Children, Sesame Workshop, World Vision, Their World, Right to Play, Results Canada, Plan International, and BRAC, who work hand in hand with philanthropic organizations such as LEGO, Porticus, Bernard Van Leer, and Hilton Foundation, just to name a few. While I am sure there have been numerous estimates put forward in the last few days to establish the challenges, I'm going to cite a recent UNICEF needs assessment that states 20 million Syrians across the Middle East and North Africa require humanitarian support. While this is a poor proxy for identifying the scale of resourcing required, its help sets the scene. Speaking just about public funding for a moment, according to a 2020 analysis of international aid levels for early childhood services in crisis contexts that was done in 2017 by C Consulting, of the 192 billion of total development funding, only 3.3% went to ECD and crisis affected countries. Majority of the growth of this funding has come from multilateral organizations, such as the World Bank. On humanitarian assistance, of the 25 billion spent in 2017, it's estimated that just 2% of this funding reaches young children and their families, with UNICEF and EU topping the list of donors. While I'm painting a pretty picture on the need to step up bilateral financing, we are all intimately familiar with the fact that budgets are shrinking, and more than ever, we must do more with less, while also pushing funding towards local voices and the most marginalized. Moving Minds Alliance is working to shift this trajectory, building partnerships and maximizing the use of evidence to make the case for additional, or in most cases, better quality financing. Our vision as a collective is to realize increased development and humanitarian funding for ECD in humanitarian settings. By working in coalition, we aim to achieve strength in numbers, establish cohesive and clear messaging, hold presence at global events, and disseminate evidence on what works to use donor spending effectively and sustainably. The evidence has shown us time and time again that working to address families at an ecosystem level, as an ecosystem at the household level, is critical, where political boundaries and funding authorities often fall flat. In response to these challenges, building on years of assessment on the state of global financing, we're currently finalizing research around the humanitarian system and how it affects funding for ECD and parent interventions. Some examples where we have seen positive action are with our partners in the US government. I know Jamie Gao is presenting soon, and her team has an unwavering commitment to generating attention and support for implementation of the Global Child Thrive Act, alongside the support of congressional budget holders, and it is a model to be emulated. The increases for children in adversity through the US government are small in numbers, to the tune of $5 million over the last 3 years, which represents a 20% increase from 2020. This is a win to be celebrated, given the catalytic effect that this funding has across the US government and other partners. This amount is complemented by qualitative indication of prioritization across health, education, and protection budgets. And the US also recently published the Global Women's Economic Security Strategy, where care is one of 4 priorities, as well as allocating $15 million to the World Bank Pooled Fund for Caregiving Infrastructure. More work is needed to ensure this comprehensive funding can reach the Middle East and crisis-affected populations. We are also working with the World Bank Early Learning Partnership and World Bank Fragile Conflict Violence Teams. Providing them with catalytic funding, we hope will lead to greater technical assistance to governments so they can support maximizing the quality of investments reaching crisis-affected populations as well. We are encouraged by the goal of using this funding to generate an additional $250 million and strengthen engagement with the evidence based on parenting. The Early Learning Partnership team just put out a great blog on this, and I encourage you all to go read it, and I'll put it in the chat afterwards. We're also grappling with building new champions, such as the government of France and Canada, who have not been traditional investors in ECD or parenting, but who we believe hold great promise, either as normative supporters of this agenda or have the potential to encourage new financing flows. France is one of the only donors worldwide that has committed to increasing its foreign assistance, and President Macron campaigned as a champion for child rights. We are seeding new local coalitions in these key donor markets to ensure we can bring relevant organizations together to speak on behalf of children and their parents holistically. Through MMA, we're not only working toward increased public financing, but also philanthropic. Given our membership and steering committee is in part led by philanthropists, we are grappling with their role as a complement to public financing and hope to bring new voices to the table. There is a critical role for philanthropists to be paving the way for innovative approaches, no matter how big or small their investment. There is an opportunity to do more to support refugee parent voices, invest not just in programs, but in research and advocacy, as well as to redistribute the power imbalance that we know colonialism has imposed on our aid systems. As a beneficiary of private funding by Lego and MacArthur Foundation through the programs I serve at International Rescue Committee, called Ahmad Simpson and Play to Learn, I have seen firsthand the tremendous role private funding has in catalyzing new ways of working. The collective $2 million allocated to us and Sesame Workshop has served as proof of concept, allowing us to be more flexible, agile, and risk tolerant to establish innovative ways of working. This funding has paid significant dividends, allowing us to reach 1.7 million beneficiaries through direct services across the Middle East and 23 million through the Ahmad Simpson TV show. We have piloted and tested innovative working models, enabled solutions that are bolder in scale and scope and complexity, and we all know we need more investments like it, where grantees are seen as partners, not just funding recipients. We have heard time and time again that a shift is required to move toward innovative and flexible public and private financing in order to meet the undue burden with limited funds available. If I had a wish list of what it would take to get there, I would stress political support and policy commitments, which are the most critical influences on funding and require everyone in this room's commitment to advocacy, with a greater emphasis on mobilizing community demand. I would stress the need to think beyond short funding cycles meant to drive short-term solutions to longer-lasting crises. And I would encourage local level funding autonomy in order to support initiatives that raise the voices of parents and children. And finally, and maybe most importantly, we should align financing needs and evidence on what works for whom at what cost to target those in greatest need. The only way we will come close to meeting their needs is targeted bespoke investments backed by data and evidence. In summary, the rich presentations throughout the past few days embody the wealth of evidence on why putting parents and their children at the epicenter of investment is the best bet. But this community must come together regularly to build and scale our collective arguments, putting years of lessons learned to work towards solving the most complex global challenges of our time, including resourcing these initiatives. Ambitious, bold, and thoughtful partnerships are essential to ensure the funding and the future of our children across the Middle East region and the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elana, for the wonderful presentation. I take this moment now to welcome Arif Neki. You're most welcome. The floor is yours.
Go ahead, Arif, if you're able to unmute.
Yes, there was a message that the host would need to authorize me to unmute, but now it's fine. Thank you very much. Delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting us. I'm very interested in hearing all the proceedings that have gone on so far. And really what I'd like to do is from our region, give you some of our experiences around two key things. One is around multi-stakeholder platforms. I think it's very clear that multi-stakeholder platforms are the only way to move forward, where any single agency, single institution or organization, even it be a bilateral or multilateral, needs to leverage partnerships. And the second one is really around this shift from funding to financing, where a number of emerging middle-income African countries are facing this drop in ODA, drop in grants, and thinking about what the Secretary General Antonio Guterres refers to as the shift from SDG funding to financing. So I'm quickly going to run through a few slides and hopefully talk about our experiences. In some cases, it might be in a slightly different sector, but some of these are tools that are transferable. Next slide, please. So really, the idea around a multi-stakeholder platform is to convene, connect, and catalyze partnerships, to create a backbone and an ecosystem on the ground to do this. And this was precisely the comment of the Kenya government when it announced the establishment of the SDG partnership platform with the UN system in Kenya to create a concrete ecosystem on the ground beyond the pledges of partnerships on SDG 17 that you traditionally would hear in every conference. Next slide, please. So one of the key issues, as I mentioned, is the shift from funding to financing. And many of these emerging African countries becoming middle-income countries are seeing a major move from bilaterals, moving from aid to trade, looking at significant drops in ODA. And ODA in and of itself hasn't always been the largest source of private capital moving in the market. So, for example, in countries like ours, you're looking at public funding available at about $30 billion, but mostly constrained by debt service. When you see the private sector flows in the market are $90 billion. So really, one can think about being a magnet to influence many of these flows, both public and private, to the extent that you can leverage these kinds of partnerships as grant funding drops. And with private sector, really the interesting thing is to go beyond CSR and small fragmented grants from time to time, which often are tied to local communities or certain sectors, but to go after profit with purpose, the long-term investment capital that private sector will bring to the table, provided they see value from a multi-stakeholder platform in curating and supporting the types of investment applications they would like to think of doing, as long as we see both economic and social impacts happening simultaneously. It's really the profit with purpose, the shared value, triple bottom line, whatever you want to call it. Next slide, please. So multi-stakeholder partnerships really, in our case, have involved bilaterals, private sector companies, foundations, civil society aggregations, academia, universities, sometimes innovation hubs, etc. So it's really about bringing all these stakeholders together and creating consortia around very concrete initiatives where one can essentially convene, connect, and catalyze some of this work. Next slide, please. And the kinds of work streams that we've been working on in this emerging environment is really around ecosystem building, which is creating concrete platforms with private sector. For example, the private sector alliances, the philanthropy alliances. We have a partnership currently with all the financing networks in the country coming together as impact investing. And these are providers of deal flow, looking for good opportunities to finance. And at the same time, we're looking at a whole host of initiatives, really good critical initiatives, including care, including parenting, that are looking for some level of financing support. So really the ecosystem building is around creating joint platforms. Market development is really around understanding what is the opportunity in the market for all of your stakeholders in the multi-stakeholder platform, including private sector. For example, in primary healthcare, when we launched, we did a study with McKinsey supported by USAID and found there was a $6 billion opportunity over the next 10 years in specific subsectors, and we mapped out deal sizes and subsectors to create a $200 million pipeline of very concrete initiatives in primary healthcare, which hitherto were considered unbankable. So it is really important to create some level of data and market development work to entice private capital to come to the table. Innovative financing is really about creating some of those innovative instruments, like in our case, the world's first adolescent sexual reproductive health development impact bond to support 500,000 girls accessing facilities, health facilities in 10 subnational counties in a country, and creating a window for outcome payers on a pay-for-performance basis, but also creating a window for investors with a guaranteed minimum return. The third one is really around creating concrete investment pipelines, as I alluded to earlier on. Scaling up innovations. We have vibrant, innovation activity happening in Africa, the Silicon Savannah. But the issue is, is this going to change the game? What are the opportunities for looking at proven innovations that can scale to create the kinds of systems, influence, and impact we're looking for? And this requires oftentimes financing. It requires oftentimes facilitation. And finally, policy advocacy. There's a whole host of constant operating environment, legal, fiscal, regulatory policies that need to be addressed. So these are some of the kind of key work streams that we found have been useful to attract private capital, philanthropic capital, and create public-private partnerships, particularly around financing. Next slide, please. So, the idea is to really, depending on the initiative that is being supported, one could work across a blend of everything from grant funding on the left through various levels of funding opportunity with impact and profit increasing up to commercial funding right at the other end. And oftentimes the kind of blended instruments will also be a continuum where you would start with some seed capital, which is philanthropic, which in turn attracts private capital and which in turn attracts co-funding from government. So we've seen some of those examples where it's a bit of a relay in terms of the continuum for creating blended financing instruments. Next slide, please. One of the approaches that we also looked at as an option is to think about pooled funding. So this is a multi-partner trust fund created in New York through the MPTF office at the UN, which allows the design of very specific demand-driven windows that allow partners, donors, financiers to earmark up to outcome level. In our case, it's around people and peace, planet and prosperity being two very key strategic areas within which there are 17 joint programs, but also partnerships as an enabler, where you might have transversal windows for children, for youth, and the like. So this is one of the instruments that we found has been quite useful, and it has also encouraged less fragmentation and more collective action. We have a funding compact that bilaterals have signed globally, and oftentimes those targets for pooled funding at country level have not been met. So here's an opportunity to entice more pooled funding around the kinds of things that we'd like to work with. Next slide, please. I'll skip this slide. These are just some of our success indicators. Next slide, please. So when I speak about ecosystem building, these are the kinds of joint structured partnerships and platforms that we created in order that funding and financing flows can be linked across various sectors and across various players, including government, private sector, and public sector. And this has taken a few years in terms of getting this architecture going, but currently it is very vibrant, and it's the kind of example that we're supporting about 7 countries in Africa through their UN resident coordinators replicate as a partnership platform. So it's gained some level of currency as countries move from funding to financing. Next slide, please. So I'll skip these. The examples have been around, grant funding that one can work with across a range of partners, which I think all of us have been familiar with. The multi-partner trust funds we spoke about. We can move on to the next slide. The third option, as I mentioned, is creating pooled funding and multi-partner trust funds that are driven locally by steering committees across each window, and one can create steering committees across government, private sector, philanthropy, UN, etc., and sort of design it accordingly. Next slide, please. So there are some examples. For example, this development impact bond I spoke about. Next slide, please. Which have attracted sort of seed funding from the joint SDG fund of $7 million. Next slide, please. But allowed us to sort of design, as I mentioned, 2 windows that allow investor contributions for a guaranteed return. Currently, we're working with UBS Philanthropy's Bridges Fund, as well as outcome funders like the Joint Fund, the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, and other partners to go from a $7 million seed fund to approximately $18 million fund that we're launching next month. And the idea is eventually in phase 3 to embed this within government. So you see all the private logos disappear and all you have is a government logo. So it's really about creating that systems change. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. Some of the emerging opportunities we've seen around creating ECD outcome funds, creating diaspora funds, climate funds. So these are transferable instruments where, depending on the interest and appetite of outcome funders and investors, one could design for parenting or for various aspects around the nurturing care framework, specific types of outcome funds that we're exploring as well. Next slide, please. I talked about the study, next slide, please, which really talked about what is the data one can put on the table to entice private capital. So this gives you an example of how we unlock $200 million across various subsectors by providing this kind of information through a study we did with McKinsey and USAID. So market intelligence is also extremely important to bring in private sector. It's really around partnerships relying on enlightened self-interest. How do you create this win-win across private and public partners? Next slide, please. Apologies for running through this fairly quickly, but I'm trying to keep it within my time limit. So we came up with some big ideas, and these are examples I'd be happy to discuss with colleagues who might be interested later on. Next slide, please. This one is interesting. It's again about an innovative financing instrument, but this time it's with government and private sector. And next slide. What this is about is getting last mile community members who can't afford to get onto health insurance, a public-private wallet that blends public contributions and private contributions to create a mobile wallet that brings them into the National Health Insurance Fund, but allows them the opportunity of paying into the fund as their income grows. So it's kind of a sliding scale. And this has been useful because the government itself couldn't reach some of these last mile populations. And this public-private partnership, which Farm Access Dutch Foundation has been leading with us, has actually been extremely successful. And this is done in one subnational county, which can be scaled up to 46 other counties. So there are clear examples of how mobile technology and digitization have allowed us to blend public and private capital to leave no one behind and really walk the talk around leaving no one behind. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So this is from a different sector. It's about smallholder farmers, but I think the principle is really about creating guarantee instruments, partial guarantee instruments through commercial banks, through microfinance institutions, and through savings and credit cooperatives that allow financing to go right down to the grassroots. And these partial guarantees actually create the de-risking mechanism that entices private capital to the kinds of places where we are leaving people behind. So oftentimes investors will only invest in safe capital centers. And here's an opportunity to de-risk this. In this case, $125 million going through to smallholder farmers, including a green credit line. This approach and design is very transferable to various sectors, and it could be transferable to parenting as well. And there are various de-risking and guarantee instruments available for Africa, which oftentimes are underutilized. So therein lies an opportunity for us to think about de-risking instruments. Next slide, please. One of the examples that I speak to from my personal experience was as a regional CEO of the Aga Khan Foundation for over 13 years. We worked with the Madrasa program, which many of you might be familiar with, which was around, at any point in time, 200 community-led and community-owned ECD centers, where you blended the latest best ECD approaches with some of the universal ethical value messages that communities blended into the curriculum. And here we found that a lot of the schools in very poor communities couldn't afford to pay their staff, particularly the teachers that we had trained on ECD. And so what we did was created mini endowments. Next slide, please. We created mini endowments on a matching basis, where communities were matched on a dollar-for-dollar basis, pooled 200 ECD centers and community endowments, and then had communities decide where they wanted to invest this internationally, either in treasury bills, Islamic mutual funds, etc. And eventually, after 2 rounds, they ended up buying properties, and these properties are now providing rental income, likely for the next 90 years, back to those ECD centers. And some of that capital also came from seaweed farmers in Tanzania and Zanzibar, from a percentage of their seaweed income, because these were also parents who had children in the ECD. So there are opportunities to sort of tap into these kinds of creative mini endowments as well. Next slide, please. So there's some key learnings here, but I won't go into too much detail there. Next slide, please. Minza, I'm almost done. In terms of governance, I think this is one of the most critical areas for us to ensure high transparency. For example, multi-partner trust funds can track every single dollar that flows through your system on a public website, to ensure that you have a backbone secretariat for the platform, to ensure that there's ecosystem convergence, which is really saying, let's not duplicate and fragment the work that we're all doing. And oftentimes with community health workers and parenting initiatives, there is that risk of fragmentation and duplication. So how do you create this level of convergence? And of course, tracking obviously is critical. Next slide, please. I'm going to skip these in the interest of time, but there's a few learnings that we've taken, which include the gaps between availability of private capital and the demand for private capital, the ticket size, the conditionalities, the exchange risk, etc., etc. So next slide, please. With that, I would like to perhaps stop here and say thank you very much for this opportunity, and apologies for having rushed through a lot of material, which I'll be happy to discuss in future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ali, for this wonderful presentation. I can see in the chat there is a lot of interest in your presentation, and if the question coming, we can direct them to Arif at a later stage. Given the time, we are moving forward to the next speaker, and I am introducing you, Alia. The floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all the presenters and participants who are here. My name is Ali Rawashte. I'm from the MENA Foundation. I'm the program coordinator for...
Sorry, Alia. Sorry, Alia.
Yeah.
Can you lean a little bit forward to the microphone?
Sure.
It's a little bit broken.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Is this better? Can you hear me all? I hope it's better.
Yeah.
So starting, I just want to say that I'll be presenting a little bit about our organization, who we are and what we do. I think there are a lot of interesting, maybe innovative ways that can spark creativity among our participants. And also I see a lot of common things from the previous presenters. So let me begin. Van Leer Foundation is a philanthropic organization. It's a Dutch organization that we operate and work in different parts of the globe. Next slide. So our mission is to contribute to inclusive societies where all children and communities can flourish. Our mandate is purely focusing on early childhood development, and I will speak about it in a little bit, how we operate. Next slide, please. So we ask ourselves, how can we help to shape a world in which many worlds fit? We start by saying a good start. Next slide, please. So a good start is giving all children a good start in life, sets the foundation for inclusive societies. We work globally to improve the well-being of babies, toddlers, and their caregivers. We also provide investment and knowledge to help leaders develop and scale effective policies and services with a focus on the period from pregnancy to age 5. Next slide, please. So parents and caregivers are crucial. They introduce children to the world and shape their earliest experiences. Interactions with parents and caregivers during the first 5 years of life is the most important factor in a child's brain development. This sets the foundation for lifelong health, learning, and resilience. Next slide, please. So we say to ourselves, but they don't do it alone. It takes a village. And what do we mean by a village? Next, please. So what does the village look like in a world where the villages are so much bigger? Some of us are hyper-connected, others are left out, and all of us feel alone. Sometimes parents struggle to balance work and care because they know the early years matters. A lot of parents also from different contexts, they don't realize how important this phase is. And they don't want their kids to be left behind, of course. So I just added some pictures from different contexts to give a perspective. Sometimes it can be really hard if we can go through these pictures. Next 3 to 5 slides, I think. Yeah. So it's a struggle among various different contexts. So the village needs an update, an infusion of creativity, and a new set of blueprints. So next slide. How do we work as a philanthropy that aims to serve ECD in the best way possible? We work with leaderships across societies to shape the village. The village is government, business, as meaning as private sector, civil society, and foundations. I don't want to read through all of these, but I want to emphasize on governments and how important it is to just work directly or indirectly with the government to influence policy. And also, it's very beneficial. I would love to share with everyone regarding our context. It's very crucial sometimes to follow some national strategies which will help different government entities to follow that strategy. In our context, we last year, His Majesty King Abdullah II launched the Economic Modernization Vision, which has an emphasis on early childhood development. So that's an entry point where we can also engage with the government through our partners and focus on the importance of ECD and what can be done to have a better bringing for our children. Next slide, please. So we are in the phase of launching our new strategy from 2024 until 2028. We're in the next month will be soft launching this new strategy. And I'm just sharing with you that we developed a menu of policies and programs to help leaders have an impact at scale. So this menu can be various things: parent well-being and coaching, healthcare, childcare and community centers, parks, gardens, playgrounds and streets, family-friendly jobs and housing, early years advocacy and campaigns. So I would say for the next year, our focus would be on parent mental well-being and coaching. And I'll share an example from Jordan in a while. Next slide, please. So our vision is to support leaders, and not only leaders, but we focus on leaders that will have an actual impact regarding governments, NGOs, civil society, and again, the government. We support leaders to find the ideas best suited to their context and resources. So what we basically provide is funding. We're a small donor, philanthropic, focusing on ECD. We also provide knowledge and technical assistance. We help with advocacy, we help with the policy design, and we provide our partners with executive education courses and a lot of informative study tours. That the study tours, I will have to say, that can spark again interest from the invited leaders to focus more on the objective of the study tour, which they can bring back learnings and start their own programs regarding the topic. Next slide, please. So this is just a documentation of our achievements and what we do all over the globe. Again, we invest heavily in the executive education courses that we provide to our partners, like INSEAD and also London School for Economics and different other courses. And yeah, we have a network of leaders, and I will focus again and emphasize on bringing leaders, and managing partnerships in the right way can open a lot of doors for programs to scale at large, in a very effective manner. Next slide. So our strategic focus will be on cities, state and national partnerships, and we're also looking always for new perspectives that can add value to what we're doing. So in the next slide, I will share a couple of examples from Jordan that we are supporting these programs. Next slide. So speaking of the mental well-being of caregivers, we are very happy to be partners with RAS, the Royal Health Awareness Society, where they are bringing a new needed intervention in Jordan called More Than Baby Blues in Jordan. It's postpartum depression. We will be tackling this important challenge that we face. So the objectives is to educate mothers about postpartum depression, causes and coping mechanisms, building capacity among community members and healthcare providers. And the key players are the Royal Health Awareness Society, RAS, and they are established this amazing, important partnership with the Ministry of Health. So they both work in harmony and just exchange experiences and in a very efficient way. The strategy is to enhance clinical and social support access, to expedite new mothers, identify supportive behaviors among mothers and healthcare providers. So I just want to highlight the behavioral change aspect because it's very, very integrated in all of our interventions. And the INSEAD course that I mentioned earlier is done and supported by Van Leer Foundation. where we believe it's essential to have a behavioral change component integrated in all of our interventions if we want to have that impact and that change of behaviors, whether it's the government, whether it's the civil society, whether it's partners. So it's very important to have it. So I will go to our next example. Next slide, please. And we're also supporting a very successful model that we see is very important also. It's called the CSI, Caregiver Support Intervention in Jordan, implemented by our partners, World Child Holland. I just want to talk real quick about this one because we are also thinking of scaling this program for phase 2 in the coming months in collaboration with the Ministry of Social Development through our wonderful partners, World Child Holland. In the past years, as part of the refugee response portfolio in Bandir Foundation, we invested in adaptation and delivering proof of concept for the CSI in Lebanon. An RCT was conducted, co-funded with OSF and ELMA Philanthropies, which demonstrated that the CSI improved parenting, and especially a reduction in harsh parenting, in part by reducing caregivers' distress, demonstrating the value of addressing caregivers' well-being as a pathway to strengthening partnering in adversity. So the program aimed to evaluate and scale model of World Child Holland caregivers support intervention in Jordan and beyond. It's an evidence-based 9-session program geared at improving caregivers' parenting practices as a pathway to improve the psychosocial well-being of children in an adverse environment. Due to caregivers experiencing war coupled with stressors related to COVID-19, caregivers in Jordan have found to experience high levels of anxiety and stress. So it has 2 parts: the research part that provided the evidence-based model, and policy relevant work, including conducting costing analysis and engagement with key stakeholders within the government and the humanitarian system in Jordan. So I just wanted to show these 2 examples and how we try to scale to our partners with the government. And it does scale up doesn't always have to be with governments. It can mean different things. Maybe you're targeting a wider range of population, or again, scaling with the government, or institutionalization of your intervention, or a certain aspect that you feel very important. Next slide, please. So I just want to talk a little bit about cities and what we do. I will introduce the Urban 95 pillar that we find very important in our work. And I want to ask you this question. If you can experience the city from a 95 centimeter, the perspective of a toddler and their family, what would you change? Because sometimes when we're walking around in our cities, we can find a lot of challenges, not to mention toddlers and babies trying to navigate cities. So next slide. Urban 95 is an initiative by Bandir Foundation also. We've begun work 2016 with a handful of city leaders to understand how they can support young children and families. And today we work with more than 81 cities around the world. And we are in Jordan making progress with one city in Jordan called Irbid, with the municipality, with the mayor. He's the leader who started or shared his interest in bringing ECD elements in his city. And he saw from the study tour, we invited him to how important it is for a city to have certain aspects that can accommodate and serve all families from all different ages. Next slide, please. So scalability models in cities are strategies or approaches that are used to expand urban programs or initiatives to reach a larger population or a wider geographic area to improve their impact and create sustainable change. Next slide. So I want to share with you some types of models that we use for scalability, in particular for urban programs that will depend on the specific program, the local context, and again, context is very important from one country to another, or even within the same country, it varies from one area to another. So it's very important to take it into consideration. It's important to consider a range of options and determine which model is most appropriate for your situation. We do replications, we do partnerships, we do technology, policy change, social franchising, and community-led scaling. So in the next couple of slides, I just try to explain what do we mean by replication and what do we mean by partnerships. I'm not gonna talk about these slides in the interest of time. Just thought it's good to have it for reference. So maybe you can go to slide 33, please. Next. 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 Two more. Yeah. Exactly. Thank you. State and national partnerships. So we have partnerships at a state and national levels for three reasons: for policy making, for reaching more cities, for reaching rural communities. And again, we use the same menu for policy and program that I showed you earlier in the previous slide. Options that are basis for conversation about partnerships at the state and national level, adapting as needed in each context. So last but not least, I just want to share with you, next slide, please, some of the important products that we issue yearly is the Early Childhood Matters, the ECM. It's the Foundation's signature journal, shares knowledge with a global community of advocates, policymakers, academics, and practitioners working to ensure all children have a good start in life. We plan to use the journal to explore topics where we want to learn more to improve our programs. And I would recommend, if anyone is interested, maybe to check out our 2022 issue. It was launched a couple of months ago, and it has a lot of knowledge to share and different experiences that might bring new perspectives to your way forward. We also have the Good Start Challenge. In the next slide, please. That I will not be talking about. It's just one of the things that we also provide. And for our new strategy, the last but not least slide, please, is the Van Leer Fellowship. Next. So in our new strategy, yes, we worked just with a range of, we also operate, so because ECD is integrated in different sectors and fields, we tried to think of the fellowship that will bring relevant practitioners or people who believe in the work that is relevant to ECD, that we can provide the ECD knowledge of in this fellowship. This is in a nutshell that what we do. And thank you for listening to me. And thanks again, Katie, for the invitation. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. We really appreciate your time and you keeping up to the time. I see there is a lot of interest in all the things that we have been discussing, and questions are already popping up in the chat. So we shall take them later on in the question and answer session. A big thank you to all the keynote speakers in the plenary. We are now transitioning to the panel sessions to ensure that there is a lively and engaging discussion. I encourage all of you to actively participate. Please submit your questions to our esteemed panelists using the chat feature. At this moment, it's my pleasure to introduce the Executive Director of the Early Childhood Development Action Network, Ms. Elizabeth Lule. Elizabeth will guide us through the panel and the subsequent question and answer session. Let's give a warm welcome to Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you, Benza. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody. And thank you to everyone for joining us today and during the previous 2 days of the regional convening in support of parents and caregivers in the Eastern Mediterranean, Middle East, and North Africa regions. Over the past 2 days, we've heard about the current landscape of parenting and caregiving in the region, and about how to utilize the evidence we're gaining in the region to further policies around parent and caregiver support and achieve scaling of evidence-based interventions. Today, during the convening, we're looking ahead to the way forward and the next steps to achieve universal support for parents and caregivers in the region. So with this in mind, this panel discussion will focus on a series of interlocking themes and topics, and in particular on how to engage cross-sectoral action to support parents and caregivers, optimizing existing platforms to better reach parents and increase or improve resourcing of parenting interventions. So I'm very pleased to welcome our 4 speakers to the panel today. Dr. Ala Shele, who is a Senior Program Manager with the Royal Health Awareness Society of Jordan, Manar Shukri, the Early Childhood Development Technical Lead with the International Rescue Committee, Emily Garin, Senior Director of Advocacy with the Sesame Workshop, and Sweta Shah, Senior Early Childhood Development Consultant. And without much ado, I'm going to start with Ala. If you could switch on your video is on. And I have a question for you. As we've seen from the examples over the past 2 days, there are many different sectors and platforms that parents and caregivers can be reached through. How is the Royal Health Awareness Society of Jordan reaching parents and caregivers? Can you share some examples from your work in Jordan? Over to you, Ala.
Yes, sure. Thank you for the great opportunity that you're inviting us to such a great convening. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. I am Ala Shille. I am a Senior Program Manager at the Royal Health Awareness Society. I'm working on ECD and school feeding projects at the Royal Health Awareness Society. First of all, the Royal Health Awareness Society established in 2005. We are working, developing and implementing public health programs and safety and awareness programs in Jordan in partnership with public and private sector, as well as civil society organization. We believe that we will have a healthy and safe Jordan community, and we're working to empower Jordan community to adopt healthy lifestyle through raising awareness, health awareness, and enhance the environment conducive to safe and healthy behaviors in Jordan. As for the platforms or how we are working with parenting programs, as the brief that I talked about the Royal Health Awareness Society, we believe in the life cycle approach. We're working with the community since the maternity through the elderly. And one of the main platforms that we are working with is the healthcare platform. We are working with the Ministry of Health especially, and we believe that it is an excellent opportunity or it's an important entry point that provides a provision of ECD related services for parents and children who is not entering the nurseries and schools yet. Because here at Jordan, people believe in the healthcare providers, and they trust the healthcare providers. So we invest in that trust, and we are working with the healthcare providers and equipped them with information, guidance, and counseling and development, so we can work with them in parallel to improve ECD and parenting in Jordan. So do you want me to continue the other questions, examples of our programs?
Yes, please, Ala.
Yes, yes. So as our program of ECD in Jordan, we believe that we are following the socio-ecological model in Jordan. We're working with parents, and we targeted parents through the Ministry of Health or through the healthcare providers, through the doctors, through the midwives and the nurses. Also, we're working with the care providers in nurseries and the teachers for the students who is at the age of 4. Also, we're working with other stakeholders so we can work on the ECD friendly policies, and we are following the SPCC methodology to ensure the meaningful impact for the children or on the life of the children. For example, we have more than now one project that working on parenting. We have the First Steps, Big Steps project that is implementing with the Plan International and BVLF. Alia was talking previously, and the project is funded by BVLF. We're working on parenting sessions through the health centers with the healthcare providers. And in the past 2 years, we reached around 2,000 parents and around 1,000 children. Also, we have another project that it was run previously. We're working with nurseries. We have a parenting training for the nurseries teachers, and we reach around 70 nurseries, reaching of total beneficiaries around 100. Also, we are working now with the healthcare providers, with the doctors. We have the project under the name of upskilling pediatrics. We have a collaboration with BVLF and the American Academy of Pediatrics. We conduct a training for 20 master trainers from the Ministry of Health and private sector doctors by the AAP on upskilling the pediatrics on ECD knowledge, because when we do the inside gathering, the pediatrics, we know that they don't have time to have sessions for the ECD for parents. Also, they don't have enough knowledge because they are studying physicians. They did not studying ECD as a topic. So we conduct a training for them, and each of those 20 master trainers now we're conducting a training for another 10 pediatrics or healthcare providers. So we're aiming to reach another 200 pediatrics. Also, Ras, we are trying to capitalize on the relationship with the local community, and we have trainings with the community health volunteers, with volunteers within the community, so they can conduct a parenting session for people within the community. And now we are targeting around 1,000 30 healthcare providers, targeting 1,000 parents within the community within 3 governorates in Jordan. Also, we have a MOOC, massive online open course. It's aiming for ECD for the healthcare providers, and it's an open online free MOOC, so anyone who is working in the healthcare can register and can have a certificate and will have an education for the ECD. Also, we will have a small component on the social media that will target an ECD awareness messages as a pilot. And that's it from my side. If you have any other question for me.
Thank you, Ala. We'll come back to you after we've heard from the other speakers. But thank you for sharing the importance of building capacity of providers, but leveraging different types of providers as well, and the importance of community engagement for behavior change, obviously. So thank you so much, Ala, for sharing
Thank you.
the work that you're doing. Now we'll go to Manar Shukri. So Manar, you've worked with the Ahlan Simsim program, which works with parents and caregivers across the region. How can we best reach parents and caregivers to meet their needs across multiple sectors? We heard from Ala about the health sector providers, and how has the Ahlan Simsim program reached parents? If you could share that with us. Thank you, Manar. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. In fact, my example is also about the Ministry of Health in Jordan. But to start with, to best reach caregivers, we should think about the entry points to reach caregivers. Where are they? What services they take? How can we enable the ecosystem of caregivers to support their needs? We also need to learn a lot about the sector that we're going to work in and what they can offer. What can be integrated into other services as a quick win without adding burden on the original service? Using the human-centered design approach allows us to understand the user experience, what they need, how do they need it, where they need it, and for how long. In Ahlan Simsim, we created a program for caregivers using the human-centered design approach that includes the following steps. And each step, it has several sub-steps, so I'll just stick to the main step. Assess the needs of caregivers, design the intervention based on the needs of the caregivers, develop the contextualized content, test the intervention with sample of clients, collect feedback from all stakeholders, including caregivers and facilitators, enhance based on the feedback collected, disseminate to use the intervention at scale. In Ahlan Simsim, we succeeded to reach caregivers in different modalities, remotely and through digital platforms, in person or a hybrid modality. And we also succeeded to integrate caregivers' interventions into health, education, and social affairs. Even if the intervention, the original intervention is small, we can also add a session for caregivers. An example for that, we supported schools to integrate caregiver sessions as part of their PTA or through the readiness program that we introduced in several countries in the region. As an example of integration caregivers into interventions into sectors, Ahlan Simsim co-designed and piloted with the Ministry of Health in Jordan an intervention to integrate ECD tips and messages for caregivers of children from birth till 6 years during their regular check-ins in the health centers. Ahlan Simsim trained midwives on the approach of delivering the tips or the messages to caregivers that is based on a dialogue between the midwife and the caregiver. On the other hand, we found that the waiting time for caregivers and children is high, and the spaces are not resourced with child-appropriate resources. For that, we prepared the waiting space with interactive exhibits for children to play with, and with posters that contain QR codes for caregivers to scan to reach via a chatbot, age-appropriate activities for their children that allow them to engage with their children in those activities. As a result of the pilot, the Ministry of Health decided to expand the integration to more health centers and to revise the midwife job description to add the new ECD new task to their responsibilities. Also, the Ministry of Health is revising the child medical booklet to add to it some developmental milestones to follow up on the development of the child with the caregivers. Some of the feedback we received from midwives, and I'm quoting here. This is the first time I received training on ECD. It is not only that I will disseminate those tips and messages to caregivers, I personally benefited from the tips with my children. A quote from a caregiver, I did not know that babies can benefit from talking to them. I thought they only need to eat and sleep. Now I'm talking to my child all the time. It is worth to mention also that the Ministry of Health in Iraq has started co-designing with us to pilot this intervention on a sample of clinics in Iraq. Way forward or recommendations regarding parenting or caregivers programs, it's very important to position the caregivers in the center of the approach, as we do for children. We put children in the middle and everything is around the child. The same thing could happen to caregivers, and work with them as partners. They are partners, they have a say on what I have listed at the beginning of my presentation. And we also need to find innovative ways to include fathers, because we know the participation of fathers are, it's a little bit low. We need to continue advocating for changing policies to support caregivers in their role. We need to increase investment in caregivers as it will have an impact on children's development. We also need to involve all stakeholders, including government, communities, and private sector in supporting caregivers. With this, I end my presentation. I have stuck to the time given to me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Manar. I think you highlighted the importance of treating caregivers as equal partners and making sure that we are actually addressing their needs and not parachuting in solutions from elsewhere. And thank you for highlighting that. Now we go to Emily. We've just seen an example of the impact that parent and caregiver support interventions can have in humanitarian settings. What efforts and progress have been made in securing resourcing for parents through the advocacy and the humanitarian coordination efforts of Moving Minds Alliance and other like-minded actors? Over to you, Emily.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and everyone for joining us this afternoon. And for those of you who are not familiar, the Moving Minds Alliance is a network of several dozen organizations working in a lot of different regions, but in particular, we have a large number of members in MENA, and we're really focused on making sure that ECD and support for children and families is embedded into the way that everyone approaches addressing a humanitarian crisis. And we've really done that in a number of different ways. Alana from IRC spoke earlier to some of the work that's been done with bilateral and multilateral donors to focus really specifically on the donor side of it. The work that I lead through the Moving Minds Alliance is very much focused on the humanitarian architecture itself. So all of those systems that activate in the midst of a crisis and stay activated for long after in many cases. And the way that we've approached it is really threefold. So we start with really broadening the understanding of what early childhood development and family support and parenting support is. I think for so long, people have focused on it as pre-primary and really thinking about it only in the education sense, but not thinking about it more holistically about the health in the water and sanitation and the parenting and all of those pieces that go alongside it. So the first part is really socializing the idea and the breadth of what proper nurturing care really looks like and can look like. And built into that is strengthening the evidence base around interventions here. So making sure that people not only understand what those elements are, but that they are possible in the midst of humanitarian crises. And that's a lot of the work that's happened in the last few years, including new evidence from the Ahmed Simpson project that you just heard about from Manar. So once people have this broader understanding, the second step that we really work on is making sure that it's built into the core elements of the humanitarian system itself. So that starts with needs assessments. When international humanitarian actors come in and identify what the challenges are post-crisis or after the onset of a crisis, these formal assessments may or may not include questions that are really specific about the needs of parents and other caregivers and young children. So building it into that understanding of the underlying ideas from the very beginning. And then those the understanding of those needs assessments is then translated into the international funding appeals that go to governments and other donors around the world. So unless you get into the needs piece, you can't get into the appeal. And then once those appeals are formulated, it's really important that we, again, not stick to a single sector within an appeal, because we know that the needs of children and caregivers aren't confined to the education sector or the health sector or protection, et cetera. All of those elements have to come together. And then finally, the third step is working together with the Moving Minds Alliance. We begin to advocate for the funding of those appeals. It's first we have to understand, what the needs are. Then we have to make sure that we ask for the funding for those pieces, and then we actually have to make sure that those pieces are funded. And that's where I think some of the elements of advocacy have been so important that you heard a couple of references to in the opening panel, that all of the policy recommendations and the process work we can do is somewhat meaningless unless we have that follow-up advocacy to make sure that we're putting pressure on anyone who's contributing financial resources to a humanitarian response. And that means both external funders that we've talked a lot about, but also some of the domestic opportunities for scaling a response in not just the immediate aftermath of a crisis, but some of those long-term resolutions to longstanding crises. And I think that's what's really important, and what we've seen a lot of evidence from some of the longstanding work in the MENA region with the government of Jordan and the government of Lebanon, thinking about how to take some of this proof of concept and build it into their national policies, and thinking about standards for nurseries in Lebanon and how those can be expanded and scaled as a support for the quality learning and for parents, et cetera. So I think that making sure that we follow all three of those steps and understand the importance of each of them is the approach that we've taken. And we're really excited. I think we've laid all of that groundwork, and this is the year and the next few years that we'll start seeing it pay off.
Thank you, Emily. I think you have demonstrated the power of partnerships, the power of understanding the needs that you're trying to address, but also the power of advocacy to speak on behalf of those children on the move. So thank you so much, Emily. Now we go to Sweta. I see you now. Yes. We have seen that there are a considerable number of evidence-based packages and interventions to support parents throughout countries in the region, and more policies in favor of supporting parents. So what financing is available globally, and what else is needed to ensure that we have the resources to move these interventions and policies forward to achieve universal parenting support in the region and beyond? Over to you, Sweta.
Yeah, thanks so much, Elizabeth, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to start off just telling you a little bit about a mapping study that I did about a year ago for the Elevate Children Funders Group, which was focused particularly on philanthropic funding for parenting types of programs. And in this program, in this mapping that I conducted, it was identified that at that time, a year ago, about $268 million were being invested into parenting programs in the global South. That's significant. However, in the analysis of that financing, one foundation was actually investing 138 million of that 268 million. So that's about half. So if that foundation at some point, that foundation is supporting many of you, but if that foundation at some point shifts its strategy, there could be a real problem with the parenting pot. So what have I seen as being effective? And I have two suggestions for increasing that parenting pot. One is that we are seeing an increased interest among bilaterals, in wanting to invest in this area, but often it's still from like the education sector. Yet there's actually significant funds that could be unlocked through bilateral funders that are focused on health and nutrition and also economic development. And I think there are ways that we can make the case for unlocking some of that financing. So that's my first suggestion. The second one is when I was, is actually, it's already been mentioned by other panelists in this panel and in the last panel, and that's about the private sector. I think, you know, as a kind of sector, we've been talking about the private sector so much, but we haven't really cracked that nut and figured out how to do it. And when I was with the Bernard Van Leer Foundation years ago, we had investments in Cote d'Ivoire, and we wanted to work with cocoa companies that were, we wanted them to invest in parenting support. And our goal was to have one company, you know, put in money. So Bernard Van Leer Foundation and the Jacobs Foundation were putting in a certain amount of money, and they use that as leverage to get the other companies to also invest, to contribute to that. And what we found is that when we talked about parenting as life skills, and parenting is something that is not just important for children, but it's also important for their company and their bottom line, that actually got them to invest. And we ended up getting 5 companies actually to invest in parenting programs, which quite really surprised us because our goal was 1. But I think, you know, thinking a lot about how we frame parenting support, that supporting parents is good for children, but it's also good for parents themselves. And that can maybe, you know, shift the thinking for some actors who don't normally invest. And then the other example I want to share with you is when I was with the Aga Khan Foundation, we worked a lot, especially starting in Kenya, with the Serena hotels. So Aga Khan Foundation has a strong connection with Serena hotels around the world. And what the foundation did was have a, you know, really worked with Serena hotels to set up a daycare and parenting program on its premises for its employees. And we were able to really talk to the hotel and say, look, again, this is something that's good for children, but it's also good for your employees. If they have childcare, if they have the knowledge of how to help their children, then they can be better employees for you and really ultimately help your bottom line. So I think there's still a huge potential for us to expand this pot on parenting. And I think the 2 big areas that I think we need to, as a sector, focus on, one is private sector, and the other is to look at bilaterals, and particularly looking at the health and education departments of those bilaterals and economic development, because we can, through economic development, we can make the case about through women's empowerment and childcare. And from health and nutrition, we can certainly make the case based on all the knowledge we have and research around the first 1,000 days. So happy to take any more questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Sweta, for your presentation and sticking to the time as well, I think, and highlighting the importance of private-public partnerships, as I think was illustrated with the work that ARIF is doing. And then how you progress that to government ownership, because I think domestic financing in the end is so important. I want to check in with the organizers if we can take just one more question, or whether we've run out of time from the audience.
I think we might be running over on time, but maybe we can take questions into the chat if the panelists are able to respond to each question in the chat.
So the one I see, how can we get more information on Ahlan Simsim? And I think Emily has shared the link in there. The other question is for, I think, Ala and Manar. How do you show effectiveness of projects in Jordan? What outcomes did you achieve through the work? And if you could, if anybody has slides, if they could share them as well. But Ala and Manar, would you like to take just like a minute to answer on that?
Yeah, I can answer about the intervention that we piloted with the Ministry of Health. In fact, we have worked with them also closely to design an assessment to check the effectiveness of the intervention. We trained the data collectors to go to the field to look at the conversation that happens between the caregiver and the midwife to see if it's happening at the first step, and then how it is perceived by the caregiver. And we collected good information. The results came out like I cannot recall the percentage, but good percentage of caregivers, they have changed their practices with their children, especially on reading, talking to children, play with them. So those were the main highlights that I can recall now from the assessment to assess the effectiveness of the intervention. Thank you.
Thank you, Manar. Ala, would you like to?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. If I may add on what Manar said, as our projects, we have the monitoring and evaluation cycle. We are trying to assess and monitor the activities through the focus group discussion, interviews, pre and post CAP surveys, and KAI interviews. And also we have results for the projects, for example, around 40 to 50%. I did not remember the exact percentage of parents who attending the parenting session have changing their behaviors towarding ECD behaviors. For example, they are trying to read to their children, they are trying to play. And as for the fathers, they are trying to have some activities with the children, for example, to have some planting outside the home and something like that. And we capture on this to have the indicators.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ala. And I think the quotations that you gave were also very powerful. Storytelling, I think, sometimes says the story better than anything else. And I hope that we can continue to do more storytelling from caregivers and providers as well. So thank you so much to our amazing speakers and for sharing the insights of what you're doing and the recommendations on how we can take this forward. Now I would like to hand back to Binza for the next session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for the expert moderation and the exciting team of panelists for answering and following up on the questions. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are moving on to the next, we are transitioning to the next phase where we are introducing the sessions. And in these sessions, we have designed them to help us delve deeper into specific areas and strategize our next steps and action plans. If you are
we can't hear you very well, Joel. Can you
hear me
yes,
now?
You can lean forward much better when you're close to the speaker. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we have designed this session to help us delve deeper into specific areas and strategize our next steps and action plans. If you are a ministry official, an implementer, a funder, you are all, I can hear some echo from someone. Yeah. So I was saying these sessions are made for us to strategize our next steps and our action plans. If you are a ministry official, an implementer, a funder, you all have a role in the ecosystem. All voices are needed to build a joint agenda to carry forward the momentum of the movement to support parents and caregivers. You have all the choice to join any of the following facilitated groups. We have Group A, which is on leadership, governance, accountability, and multi-sectoral partnerships. We have Group B, evidence, advocacy, policies, and strategies. We have Group C, services, service delivery, and implementation of intervention at scale. We have Group D, mobilization and engagement with parents and communities. Please select the group that aligns most with your interest and expertise. We value your input, and this is an excellent opportunity for us to harness our collective knowledge. Once we reconvene, we will share the key insights from each group. So I think the group sessions will open now, and feel free to join which aligns with your input. Thank you.
Can you keep the slide for a while?
And in the meantime, our group discussions will go until 15:20. So the moderators in each group and note takers should take note. Thank you.
Okay, so everyone who's still in this plenary room, this is the Leadership, Governance, Accountabilities, and Multi-Sectoral room. So if you would like to go to Group B on Evidence, Advocacy, Policies, and Strategies,
Katie?
just go down to, yes.
Yes, Katie, this is Khalid. I have to be in Group D and I cannot do that. Can you help us, Hadir or?
Yes, what you can do is go down to where it says breakout rooms.
Yes, I tried
icon
that.
with 4 boxes.
I tried it, it didn't work, so it's
Okay, our team here will move Khaled to Group D. And for anyone else, yes, I see you joining, but each one, feel free to click on the 4 squares at the bottom, and then it will give you 3 dots, and then you click on those and it'll take you to your breakout room. Sorry, 3 dots and then 4 squares. So Watfa, I think you're the moderator for Group A.
Yes.
Maybe we can leave the instructions here for anyone who's still getting themselves situated, but feel free to go ahead and begin working with your participants.
Sure. Thank you, Katie. Dear valued guests and participants, at the beginning, please allow me to welcome you all to day 3. I guess this is a day we're reaching the last day after really very fruitful discussions that have started in day 1 and day 2 about the current landscape of parenting in the region, moving later on from evidence to policy to scale. And today in our group, we, as maybe have highlighted earlier, the theme of our group will be around the leadership, governance, accountability, and the multi-sectoral. So we will be working, discussing together, and our role is actually to, come up with a recommendation how to take things forward by the governments and partners within our theme. But let's start on, identifying the priority issues related to our themes. So the floor is open for all. Please, you can unmute your mic and start, with maybe we would start with highlighting the main issues that we learned from the last 2 days. And then maybe we can come up with, a couple of recommendations. So the floor is open for all. I can manage with Arabic also, just in case. And I think we have a translator in the room. لأي سؤال حياكم الله. And I think today there was a bit of highlights about really the importance of leadership to support parents in the regions. And there were many discussions even in day one, I would say, regarding the role of, even multi-sectoral and their roles to support our mission to support parents. So.
What, Fad, just to say that before people weren't able to unmute. So maybe it's nice if we just have people put on their videos so that we feel more that like it's a discussion.
Yeah, that would be better.
If people want to put on their videos and just check that we can unmute.
Yes. Yeah, it looks better now. So we can see each other. Yeah. We have around 69 participants in the room. So that's great, a great number to come up with something, together.
So maybe we should break it down, Watfa. Maybe we should start with leadership and see what's missing in the region in terms of leadership and governance. We could put those together. Then maybe something on multi-sectoral partnerships, and then something on accountabilities. But yeah, I'm in global, so I don't know the region well enough, but I'm very curious to hear how you all feel about, in terms of leadership and governments, what is most needed.
Yes, Dr. Ghassan.
Yeah, thank you. Just to start the discussion, we have an issue here in the region is the division of or fragmentation of segregation of the issue of early childhood into different ministries. That is, the Ministry of Health will take one part of the child, which is the health part, usually between the pregnancy or birth to the 3 years old, and then the Ministry of Social Affairs between 3 and to 6, and then the Ministry of Education between 6 and 8. So this difficulty of getting ministries together is important, and I think it is one of the challenges that we all face in different Arab countries or in other EMRO and MENA countries, how to get ECD and on the top of the agenda in each country by starting getting ministries together, at least. So I guess this could be an issue that we can start with and build on that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Dr. Ghassan, actually. Yes, this is an issue. And each sector, they will look at it from different perspectives. Minister of Social Development from the social point of view, Minister of Health just from the health, point of view, and again, an education as a separate entity. So that's, I think, at a national level, as part of the leadership, to come up with rules and regulations that would bring all the partners together. That's, I think, one of the hot topics that will need to be discussed in details. I wonder the opinion of the other guests or participants, whether, at least this is in most of the, I would say, Middle East region, but I wonder if others have different experience.
Yes, sorry, because I don't know how to raise my hand because I use another, not my computer. Sorry for thank you for this. I am Ali Abdel Hussein, working with in the Iraq, UNICEF Iraq. The issue of that raised by Dr. Hassan about the multisectorial, it's also come for the health itself. For example, there is more than one program working on the ECD. Let's say that there is some, I don't want to say conflict, but disagreement between the nutrition program in Iraq with the mother-child health programs. So still there is no agree who will take the leads. And there is, we try to solve this issue. In addition to what we mentioned by Dr. Hassan, it is not easy to work as a multi-sectorial with the other sectors regarding, for example, the educations, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. All these ministry is working in parallel. So there is need effort from our, from our organization to bring all those sectors together and to push the work forward.
Again, very interesting. Yes, totally agree. And you mean the multi-sectorial and how to bring everyone all together, to support the case of, of parents and early childhood. Definitely, but definitely looking into parent-centered, I would say, approach would be very interesting. Mr. Sabri or Sabine, you would.
Yeah, maybe just before Mr. Sabri, because I would really like to hear his views on this. It would be really interesting to hear some positive case studies. Where has it worked? Are there any countries where the political engagement and leadership has been so strong? And how did that happen?
Anyone would can share with us their experience?
I can give examples if you want, Sabine.
But sorry, I interrupted Mr. Siha. He was before me.
Yeah,
but I
sure.
just thought maybe then he can take the mic and then Dr. Ghassan.
شكرا جزيلا. شكرا. هحاول كمان ارد على السؤال الاخير كمان. هو في الحقيقه احنا عندنا التحدي اللي جاله الدكتور غسان تحدي واضح في مجتمعاتنا. كل وزاره تعمل يعني في اتجاه معين. التحدي الثاني كمان على مستوى البرامج الجغرافي، لان كل برنامج بيتم في منطقه دون الاخرى. فمع الزمن الطويل ما بنقدرش نوصل لكل الاهل وكل الاطفال في كل المجتمعات. التحديين دول من اكبر التحديات يعني اللي موجوده في مجتمعاتنا. بالنسبه للتحدي الاولاني اللي هو الخاص بالقطاعات، في خبرات كتير في مصر، يعني في محاولات كتير من المجلس القومي للطفوله. امبارح كان في عرض لوزاره التضامن. اخر يعني من اهم المحاولات انا كنت مشارك فيها هي العمل على كل المتعاملين مع الاطفال من كل الوزارات، وكان ده انتاج دليل لكفاءات المتعاملين مع الاطفال في مرحله الطفوله المبكره. الدليل كان في أربع محاور. المحور الأول دعم نمو الطفل، واللي فيه بيفهم المتعامل مع الطفل إزاي بينمو مخ الطفل، إيه أهم الحاجات اللي موجودة في نقدر نساعد بيها الطفل إن هو ينمو ويزدهر. الجزء الثاني كان عن الحماية، أطر الحماية اللي موجودة في مصر وإزاي ممكن نضمن ده ونوصله للأسر. الجزء الثالث كان عن التهذيب الإيجابي والتعامل مع سلوك الطفل أثناء العمل نفسه. آخر حاجة كان كيفية دعم الأهل، يعني كان كل المتعاملين، أقصد المتعاملين هنا مش بس العاملين المباشرين مع الأطفال زي في التربية والتعليم أو الحضانات أو غيرها، لكن كل المتعاملين في كل الوزارات وكل القطاعات. فإذا الحل اللي ممكن يكون عندنا إن كل القطاعات توصل الحد الأدنى للمعارف والمهارات لكل المتعاملين مع الأطفال في القطاعات المختلفة. على المستوى الجغرافي ده كمان هيساعد، هذه الطريقة ممكن تساعد على المستوى الجغرافي للوصول إلى كل الأسر، لأن الأسر عندنا في مجتمعاتنا وخاصة المجتمعات الفقيرة هي تكتسب معلوماتها من المؤسسات اللي موجودة، فكل ما زاد وعي المؤسسات كل ما زاد كمان وعي الأسر. يعني شكرا.
Thank you very much. I wonder if Sabine, if you had the look at the translation, but Mr. Sabri was actually highlighting on the same comments that Dr. Ghassan had raised. However, he introduced another point, which is the the variation within the services that have been provided, even within the same country, that it could be different from one region. It's done differently from one region to the other. So I think looking into the quality of the services and bringing people into agreement on the type of support and help and to unify all these kind of services and their quality is very important. So I think that would be one of the other points that we need to look into it. Dr. Ghassan, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I'll give you examples in some Arab countries where this was achieved. I would start with Iraq, for instance. We were following up 2 years ago with the WHO, UNICEF, IRC, and SAVE about the national care framework in humanitarian setting. And over these workshops that we did, Iraq was one of the first countries that worked on a national ECD strategy. And there was a political commitment to that through the minister, the prime minister himself. That's the prime minister, the board there. And this political commitment made it possible for different ministries to come together and work on the strategy. The same thing happened in Tunisia, the same in Jordan, and then of course, in Morocco. What I want to say is that the issue of putting on the table, developing a national ECD strategy will get people together and make the perfect entry point for this multi-sectoral, governmental at least, and non-governmental, of course, way of getting ECD on the table, and the multi-sectoral approach to ECD, especially on the level of governments. So I would say a political commitment, working on a national ECD strategy, these two things are very important. I will give another example where in Jordan, for instance, they worked on an ECD team, working group under the umbrella of the Nurturing to National Council for Family Affairs there. And as a network, Arab network, we helped in training this group, which were ministries, NGOs, academia, all multi-sectoral people, and we helped in training on the science of ECD. We Arabized the Red River College science of ECD, and there, this course was to harmonize and building up the team rather than building capacities. And that was very helpful also in getting all stakeholders to have the same approach about ECD, the same concepts, the same vocabulary, harmonizing this team building was important in giving this science of ECD course that we Arabized from the Red River College. So I would say political commitment, national ECD strategies, and science of ECD to harmonize the teams will be great, at least these three.
Definitely. This brings us back to the importance of evidence-based practice. And that's what we lack actually in the region. Unfortunately, many programs might be here and there, but looking into the evidence and the strength of these programs that have been used, and labeled different programs of ECD might be a big issue. However, going back to the nurturing care and the ECD program, that I would say it's a very good start. And here in Oman, we also, I don't know if Dr. Ahmed Idris is with us here today, but we also started on this, and we are getting really a wonderful and amazing, I would say, results by building the capacity around ECD programs. Sapin?
So this is so interesting, and I'm really curious to hear from others. But so I hear what you're both saying, Watfa and Dr. Ghassan, that the importance of political will and the importance of capacities and working together. I'm just trying to understand, what is it that made those countries that you're mentioning, Iraq, Jordan, Tunisia, Morocco, tip? Because we also look at like the opportunity. Sometimes a country has an incredible opportunity. There's an evidence-based program, that's going to scale. There is the political will. Sometimes it's motivation of one or two high-level people, a president or a first lady. Sometimes it's the capabilities, as you were talking about capacities, the capacity to actually do this. So looking at those, like at opportunity, at motivation, at capability, which one do you think we should be investing in? I'm just trying to take the model of those 4 countries to see how we can work in other countries in the Middle East. Too complicated?
No. I'm waiting for Watfa to give me.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, how did we do it and how did we start? And I would say the willing, like to find those, leaders who would be willing for that change and to motivate them to that. That was the key. But looking into practice, what would made them, I think the presence of certain experts was the key, at least from my experience. Certain experts who were enthusiastic about it, who knew what would be the key and which door, to use that key in. I think that was really very helpful. I don't know, Dr. Ghassan, from your experience.
Yeah, I think each country had its entry point to that, Sabine, and from my experience, getting the political will and getting people to agree on working together on a national ECD strategy was very, very crucial to get them to. It's not an issue of building up networks. It's an issue of networking, how to get them together on a specific thing, and that was the national ECD strategy. And in each place, for instance, in Iraq, it was a full-fledged political commitment from the prime minister. In Jordan, the ability of forming this ECD team was crucial. In Tunisia, it was working on the national ECD strategy. In Morocco, it was the experience of the Moroccan Association for ECD that Aziz talked about yesterday. In Lebanon, because of the political problem, it was after something like 5 years of work. This year, we were able to get a national committee to work on ECD strategy. So every country is different, and every country has its political its entry point. But I believe this issue of how to work on political will, political commitment to put a national ECD strategy on the table is very important.
In addition, I think, Dr. Ghassan, I could add that also what can make a difference is that to help those countries, the help and support from WHO, from UNICEF, from different organizations, to put on table a very clear, evidence-based, simple, practical, like the ECD program. To put it on table in a very simple way. Usually people will take it. They would be more interested, to look at it. Because some of the programs might be looks complicated. They would need a lot of, experts around here and there. And maybe that at some point might, make people back, just run away from whatever, ideas or thoughts that are brought. But I think those programs, they are wonderful. Maybe it looked at Jordan or Iraq, maybe someone have this who might play a role to explore more and to give the different stakeholders in different country a chance to look at the ready-made, I would say, evidence-based program that can support families and children, like ECD program. I think as an entry point, and then to come up with a national commitments with regards to a strategy related to ECD, that might help. Or to share the experience from one country to the other. Definitely that might make a difference.
Sabine, for instance, during last year and the year before, the Arab Network put in strategy the importance of formation of ECD working groups and networks, national ECD working groups and networks as groups to start working. And that was an excellent entry point to activate the political will in the same time. And this, we were, for instance, in Jordan, we facilitated the national team, which has been working since 2018. And in Lebanon, we were able to facilitate the formation of the ECD committee this year. In Palestine last year, they launched the Palestinian network, ECD network. In Tunisia, the same. You need a commitment, a group of working group, network, team, whatever it is called, to start working in ECD nationally. And there you will start having work or accumulating work towards a political commitment to ECD.
I have more questions if nobody has any. I wonder if there's other thoughts.
Yes, I don't see, maybe in chat, I don't know if anyone.
In the meanwhile,
Okay.
can I just ask my question to whoever wants to answer it? I think Dr. Ghassan's point is, and both Watfa as well, your points, okay, so the importance of having the political will, but also the evidence, the group, the teamwork, which then leads to the motivation and the behavior change. Would you say that if we're looking at building out the parent and caregiver support, I'm coming at this from the violence prevention, there's mental health colleagues, there's adolescent health colleagues. If we're going to build this parenting and caregiver support agenda for 0 to 18 years, should we build on the ECD networks and political motivation, or should we present this as something separate?
I think the ECD group should be part of it. That is, it is something like jigsaw part that you should work on and then getting it together. Now we are working on ECD groups, and this is new in the Arab region. And we have been activating that or working on it for the past few years. Sabri Siha, for instance, Dr. Sabri was part of it in Egypt, and he knows very well what we are doing together there. So if there are these groups that are working in ECD, getting them together with the youth groups, for instance, and getting the women group together. So already these groups are there. Getting them together is a good entry point. But again, I would say that getting them together to achieve the political commitment, political commitment. It's not advocacy alone. Advocacy alone will not do. You need these people who are on the field, networking together on specific issues and getting these issues together like jigsaw parts.
What do you think, Sabine?
I think it's really interesting. I see somebody put in the chat, Elaine, that connecting it to gender empowerment is more likely to gain political attention. And I work at global level. And so I've seen, for example, if you do that in East Africa, you actually lose the agenda So
Yes.
and so it's a trade-off. Do you say actually we want to include the whole discussion on gender transformation within the parenting, or do we leave it aside, or do we try to find a midway in all that? So I'm curious how it would work in this region. Is it useful? It sounds like it's useful to start with ECD and then include the other ones in the jigsaw puzzle. But curious, Ilana, you were mentioning this, how that would work in the region. I don't know the region as well as you do.
Yeah, I don't think really it will, as you said, it might even prevent any further step if we link both together. We have issues that,
It depends on
Although
the
you can't do
country.
parenting without talking about gender. It's about
Sure.
gender empowerment. So
It depends on the country and where and how. You need to take these cultural issues in consideration, putting in mind the big picture, and building up things. Nothing will be built from one blow, if you want.
yeah.
But if
We
you have
tried,
this big
we tried,
picture,
yeah.
you can build on that.
Yeah, we tried here in Oman. We also, after the training and getting the ACD programs, we are now working on the, adaptation of the ACD program to the Omani culture, looking into even the cultural, sensitivity, cultural variations, which was a very nice, I would say, experience. It's because we got the experts from around the country. We put them all, into discussion. After training them, of course, they were trained as, ACD trainers, and then we looked at the material, how to add more, what would be more relevant to our nation and things like that. And it's really a very good experience. So I think, yes, even if ACD would be the entry point, I mean, countries, they would have the chance to look into what they would prefer to add to suit them better. And, maybe that adaptation might help, I don't know, somehow maybe it will facilitate. And again, if a country, as Dr. Ghassan said, would be willing to combine both the gender empowerment, I think it would be a challenge if they are willing to. So these cultural variations and, from one country to the other should be considered. I can see Hafiza, someone raising hand, Hafiza Kumarun. Hafiza.
Bonjour tout le monde. Je suis Hafida Boumrouane, je suis service de la santé dans l'enseignement secondaire universitaire, Royaume ministère de la Santé et de la Protection sociale du Maroc. Alors, merci beaucoup. Et pour nous, la question de développement de la petite enfance est une affaire qui est capitale. On lui accorde une importance très importante. Et on est conscient qu'il s'agit d'une affaire de tout le monde, que ce soit les secteurs institutionnels, les ONG, associations, la communauté, les parents et tout le monde. C'est pourquoi le Maroc fait de la question du développement de la petite enfance parmi ses priorités. À travers plusieurs dispositifs, plusieurs interventions. Hier, notre collègue avait présenté le travail que faisait la Fondation, mais aussi au niveau du secteur gouvernemental. Pour nous, il y a plusieurs politiques et programmes, des programmes qui s'intéressent au volet soins à travers des programmes de vaccination, nutrition, suivi de la grossesse, l'accouchement, postnatal, et aussi la lutte contre la violence, etc. Il y a aussi des approches qui ciblent la capacitation des parents à travers des classes des parents et des classes des mères. Donc, c'est deux dispositifs la classe des mères, ils se font au cours de la grossesse pour capaciter les parents et les préparer à leur tâche de parentalité, et aussi les classes des parents qui ciblent les parents avec des enfants depuis la naissance. Donc, ils ciblent l'enfant de moins de 5 ans avec des messages, avec un contenu qui est adapté et qui cible la capacitation des parents pour vraiment les accompagner dans leur tâche et pour permettre des soins qui sont attentifs et permettre aussi que les parents soient éveillés vis-à-vis des besoins de leurs enfants. Mais il y a aussi d'autres approches qui concernent les élèves qui sont au milieu scolaire à travers le programme national de la santé scolaire universitaire, qui aussi essaie d'accompagner les enfants dans leur, que ce soit pour le préscolaire, que ce soit pour le fondamental. Il y a aussi une approche qui a été mise en place, puisqu'il s'agit d'une affaire qui ne concerne pas que le ministère de la Santé, mais il concerne l'ensemble des départements institutionnels. Il y a un accord tripartite qui a été mis en place entre le ministère de la Santé et de la Protection sociale, le ministère de l'Intérieur et l'UNICEF en 2019. Et l'objectif de cet accord tripartite, c'est d'essayer d'avoir une synergie d'action entre ces départements. L'objectif est d'améliorer la santé et la nutrition de la mère et de l'enfant et d'apporter une réponse qui est intégrée aux différents défis qui concernent l'amélioration de la santé de la mère et de l'enfant, bien sûr à travers un dispositif de santé communautaire qui a pour principal objectif de réduire le taux de mortalité maternelle et infantile, surtout au milieu rural, et la mise en place d'une approche qui est intersectorielle, où, comme je viens de dire, il y a une synergie d'action des différents secteurs qui sont concernés. Et je vous remercie.
Thank you. Maybe Sabine can help us with that.
Yeah, so basically it's the Ministry of Social Affairs from Morocco who was explaining the work that they're doing in ECD, mainly relating to home visitation through the health sector, and are seeing quite good results in terms of ECD development. Maybe what, as I'm taking notes, I can just recap where we are and people can see if they want to add anything. I think we have 5 minutes left.
Sure.
So we're seeing that it's important to bring together the different ministries, that some key components of getting success and leadership is political will, strategies and policies, national networks and coordination, and evidence. And I like the way you put it, is finding the experts that are able to use the best key to the best door. Some countries that are really showing success are Iraq, Tunisia, Jordan, Morocco, with quite a lot of UNICEF and WHO advocacy together behind that. And then at regional level, what we may need, because we're looking at leadership, governance, multi-sectoral partnerships, and accountabilities, at regional level, we need very simple and implementable tools. We need to share experience. We need to share, sorry, I just got interrupted by the French translator. We need to very simple and implementable tools, need to share experiences from one country to another, need to bring together different groups that are working on parenting at national level and at regional level, like a jigsaw puzzle. And then consider including gender into the parenting agenda, along with adolescent health and violence against children and mental health. And then the importance of constantly considering cultural variation. Is there anything missing, or is there anything else that we want to report back to the group? We're being asked for practical actions to take forward. So if there's anything very practical that you would like this group to do.
I think it's great how to add that parent-centered or family-centered or family perspective has to be taken into consideration. That, I mean, to get them, you know, to work together at different spheres working together, I think it will help, because not all the programs maybe that are going to be delivered would be something, as I said, I mean, it has to be looked at. Family as a center of these programs has to be highlighted.
Ilana has her hand up.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. You know, you all heard me speak a little bit about Moving Minds Alliance, of which Dr. Ghassan is our steady warrior in the region to help lead some of the work that's happening at the global level and translating it regionally. But one area that I noticed that there's a gap, aside from the tremendous work that WHO and UNICEF are doing, is this point of collective action, right? And how do we drive people together to act in coalition that is community-led and that is, you know, coming from the voices of the people who know and have a better sense than global actors ever will, right? Of like, what needs to actually happen to create movement. I don't know if this is a symptom of cultural realities in the region, that there's just not as much type of prioritization of coalition type of work. Like, it's just not the way the methodologies work. But is there a reason for this gap, and how can we bolster either through existing platforms or potentially, in order to not confuse things, but to just generate local action forward? Like, how do we generate that? Yeah, pushing, like there's no, yeah, there has to be some, unless we're louder, it's not going to happen, right? So how do we create that echo effect in a way that meets national and regional level approaches?
I think the Convention of Rights of Child might be a very good example. And look at it now. I mean,
Definitely.
it's a wonderful example. Why not? I mean,
Definitely.
we can, if that have been, you know, signed by all, I think this one. And we can see that there are different, again, adolescent mental health have been looked at, you know, closely. However, early childhood parenting may be taken for granted, unfortunately, in most of the, you know, region. And however, look, where are we now? I mean, I think it's a great opportunity, our convening this time, to come up and highlight this issue.
Watfa, can I just say something, because I'm following this all around the world at global level, and really the Middle East is the country where the parent support is actually the least. When you look at Europe, it's way ahead. There's national platforms with evidence-based programs and policies where partners share what they're doing in terms of parent to caregiver support across the life course for different outcomes. Asia as well, so much going on. The Americas as well, and then Middle East is really much less. And I think Ilana has a good point. Like, I think the region can do it. There's so many good initiatives. It's just not gelling. And hopefully this is the beginning of a nice long marriage where it will gel and where we will be louder and where the Middle East will come up to the level of Asia and Europe very quickly, because it's possible. Yeah, sorry, just wanted to share the global perspective.
Yeah, we are asking the same question. Why not? We don't know the answer. That's why. I mean,
No,
this platform might help.
I think it is not an issue that will happen tomorrow morning. We already started this discussion, Ilana and I, and that's why we were saying like this. And the issue is that, in addition to the questions that we have, during the first day, my presentation was about the determinants, and these are issues related to politics, to culture, to poverty, to wars, and this needs time, and this needs accumulation rather than things that will happen very soon and directly. And
so Dr. Ghassan, maybe we'll need to get them something stimulating, you know, so they need to see the positive outcome out of this to get, you know, I think we need to put our hands on this and say, look, there is something beautiful is gonna come out of this. So why not we all share it, like in Europe, in the States and everywhere? Maybe
at the Arab Network, we already started that with this perspective. That is, it is a long process, and it has determinants, and we have to do it on a long time, and getting the jigsaw parts together. This is what we are trying to do. And for instance, one month in September, beginning of September, we are convening a regional forum in Cairo. In Cairo, 60 people will come from different Arab countries, from 15 Arab countries, and from different it will be multidisciplinary, and we are going to put that as part of it. Unfortunately, most probably will not have a translation. That will be Arabic only, but it is a long time, and we are trying, for instance, as I've said, to work on this national working groups here, the national ECD strategy there, We tried our nurture and care framework for humanitarian setting workshops together. This is the accumulation. This is a process, a long time process that somebody has to take care of it and bear it. This is what I'm trying to do. And it's not a checklist. It is a process. And we hope we'll be able to do something. That's the issue. That's the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ghassan. Yes, I'm trying to look into the chat if there are any comments or if anyone, we just have maybe 1 minute. Sabine, are you good? Do you think you needed to ask any more questions?
Yeah, you're reporting back, so I'll send it to you on our other chat.
Okay, I can see one last comment there in the chat with all the different parenting.
Yeah, I think the big challenge is going to be, like in every region, is we all go back. I come from violence prevention. Everybody goes back to their default thinking about, oh, this is the violence prevention agenda, or this is the mental health agenda. And I think we all have to start being able to very comfortably talk about all the agendas. And if we speak with one voice, then nobody can refuse the offer of parent and caregiver support, because everyone really understands it, because everybody either has a parent or is a parent, so, or a grandparent, yes. Ali. Everybody relates to this.
Thank you.
Let's see.
Yeah, true, but yeah, coming up with, or maybe sharing those experiences, how did they start it in different, successful countries? That would be interesting to bring it back to our region and see how applicable is that going to be. Yeah.
The issue is how to get to have different entry points and focus on parenting. That is, we'll come from different entry points, and then we'll go back to focus on one place. I think we should think in this way, and a long time. It is accumulative. It's a process.
But it's a good start. We started, at least, Dr. Ghassan. That's a very good point. At least we are there. We have the experts around now. We have participants who are attending, and they are maybe policymakers, or in the working in the same field. So they might maybe now think about and look, how would they apply it at their national level? But I'm sure getting this at a regional level, helping these different countries with different ideas, with different plans, with different programs, I'm sure it will help. Thank you. I think we are reaching to the end of our discussion, if I'm not mistaken. Sabine, is it, I thought at 3:15, that would be the end of our discussion? Or...
Yeah, so everyone is starting to come back. You can see we're in the main room, remember? So
yes.
People are starting to come back.
True.
We came back, so sorry to stop you.
No.
But you can give you 1 minute to continue.
I think we're done. Wi-Fi. You can just check the other chat. I sent you the notes.
We're fine. We're fine.
Welcome back, colleagues. Welcome back. I hope everybody has come back to the room now. Is every group in there? Yeah, I hope so, because the silence says it all. It has been a wonderful discussion in each group. I have been there and it was wonderful. It's time now to report back, and without much wasting time, because we have gone a bit overboard with our time, I want to welcome the moderators or any arrangement from each group to present what they have discussed with each other. So I will want to invite Group A to present their findings and recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vincent. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So for Group A, we had our theme was regarding the leadership, governance, accountability, and the multi-sector aspects. So we looked into different, discussion and many highlighted points. However, at a national level, some of the recommendation looking into the situation in the region is to get the different ministries together to, because it seems in most of the countries around the region, the like health focus on 0 to 3 years, social services, middle age, and education, etc., at different age group. And within the country, the quality and the type of support that are provided for parents and the early years of childhood are different from one region to the other. as the programs are different and they are not unified. There were excellent experience in Iraq, Tunisia, Jordan, and Morocco with regard to ECD programs and how to prioritize these programs with the support of UNICEF and WHO and through their advocacy. Key components for leadership, including the political commitment, putting clear strategies and at national network and bringing, enough evidence and practical, I would say, programs that are evidence-based, finding leaders that are willing to change and finding experts who are able to use the best key in the, as I said, best door. But at a regional level, our recommendation is around really providing a very simple and implementable models. Try to help and get or share experience from one country to another and to bring together the different groups that are working on parenting to achieve the political commitments together. Connecting this issue to gender might help build up, and all depends on, national, I would say, and cultural variation from one country to the other, but it's one of the things that might be linked together. Cultural variation should be looked at. Thank you very much. That is like a very simple, quick summary from Group A.
Thank you so much for keeping the time. I move on directly to Group B. Thanks.
Okay.
Group B. Yeah, we can move on to Group C. If Group B is not yet ready, we shall get back to you, Group C.
Sure, I was stepping in for a colleague to moderate Group C, so I will do the feedback on this. So as was the group that talked about service delivery and implementation at scale. Just a very quick run through. Also, Isang says they are not allowed to unmute ourselves as Group B. Should I continue, or should we wait for Group B?
Yeah, you can continue, then we shall get back to Group B.
Okay, all right, thank you. So first of all, just appreciating all of the different presentations that were made in the last 2 days and this afternoon, and the sort of number of different initiatives we saw that highlighted the different approaches to service delivery. There were some challenges, and we've just grouped them under 3 broad challenges. So one, and thanks to the colleagues who actually contributed the words, one is that there's fragmented services across the region that we see, of course, and a lot of these services don't have the full capabilities that are required to meet parents where they are and what they need. So we find that very often children's needs are more complex than what services can provide. And so there is a challenge around the comprehensiveness of parenting support services, the quality of these services, and then the coverage of these services. A second challenge was around sustained funding. And for a lot of our colleagues who are not a part of government, how do you sustain the platforms? I mean, you create and build beautiful platforms, you have experts coming in to create good services, but how do you sustain over the long term, both the coverage and the quality? And so sustained financing becomes an issue, and interestingly, even in the Gulf countries, it was mentioned as an issue. And that brings me to the third challenge, which is that there are still gaps at the leadership policy level, and these gaps are, there are policy gaps that don't create the environment for more sustained investment in parenting support programs and platforms. Coordination is still limited, and particularly this is complex because you want to look at life course as well as sectoral kind of parenting support. A parent will want support based on the age of their child or where their child is at, where they are at, and they don't fragment and say this is health or this is education, but they look at it comprehensively. So how do you create that coordination around it? So 3 challenges, the recommendations that came out. One was number 1, and I'm going to work backwards here then, and it links very much to what the other groups might have be working on, groups A and B in particular. One is supporting greater technical assistance, cross-sharing and knowledge sharing around evidence. And
sorry,
some, I think,
sorry, Neha, we have about 1 minute to wrap up.
Yeah. Thank you. So knowledge sharing around evidence, so models, returns on investment, policies that work, etc. Evidence generation that can be used as advocacy for leadership. The second one is around enhancements to service delivery for better coverage and quality, skill building of health of service providers essential here, tiered approaches as we have heard and seen. And so what constitutes a universal package here, what's more customized, what's more niche. And very, very critical here, attention to adolescent issues, which came up several times. And then the last point was on calibrating demand generation to service availability. So a lot of emphasis required on awareness generation, education programs, etc., across the ecosystem, but that demand for services amongst parents must be calibrated to services that are delivered. That's it from Group C. Back to you.
Thank you so much for keeping it brief. I will go now to Group B, that is Esang. If you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, colleagues. And I want to apologize. We have a document that we have created. My colleague Wafa took note. So we spoke on the priorities and the next steps forward for evidence and advocacy policies and strategies. Unfortunately, I've been having internet issues and I've just lost access to the document. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Wafa to share on our deliberations and what we agreed on. Wafa, please, over to you.
And Wafa, you have about 5 minutes to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Esang. Just a second. So we discussed the priorities specifically for evidence. Colleagues agreed that evidence should be an integral part of the ongoing programs, and it should be systematically and regularly generated. And it should come out in different forms, surveys, research, etc. And evidence should be on not only advocacy, but also policy development and planning or developing the programs. It was mentioned also that evidence needs to be generated on the support to caregivers, specifically for children with disabilities, and also more evidence is required to explore that the impact of investing in support to parents on the children and their development. It was mentioned that we need to strengthen the coordination between different sectors in regards to sharing information for evidence generation. When we discussed policy and advocacy, we discussed that we need to target and explore different actors, either decision makers, employers, donors, or international organizations and NGOs to make sure that supporting parents is on their priorities and their agendas. And we also need to identify champions that could be organizations, governmental institutions, or individuals that can lead advocacy and policy work. And the advocacy should not only be regarding the fundraising, but we also need to work on policy changes and later on better service design. And we should explore or map out the available interventions within the region and in other regions as well. And we need to generate evidence on what works best to support the development of policy documents or like policy briefs to support with these advocacy activities. I believe that's all from Group B, and thank you.
Thank you so much for keeping it so brief. takes us to the next group, that's Group D. Khalid, your floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Joel. And we have 5 minutes, Joel?
Yes, you have 5 minutes.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let me just very quickly start by thanking my colleagues, Stephanie and Dalia, for the support, and also to thank all colleagues who were there in the group, because it was really interesting discussion about engaging with parents and communities. And we started by stating that this convening is about parenting support. So engaging parents and having them having a critical role to play is a very important area of work. So the group was discussing thoroughly so many things, and I can just summarize that we started by discussing the priority issues in affecting communities and parents' engagement. And then we discussed some recommendations and practical steps for the way forward. In terms of issues, the group discussed mainly the barriers that are hindering parental engagement and engagement with communities. And people suggested that some factors like issues of competing priorities, competing demands in terms of work, people work 2 shifts and other things, the health issues and others. These are the competing priorities that might hinder parental engagement or engaging with parents. And also that is in addition to other issues such as the mistrust. Colleagues raised the issue of mistrust, how we can make parents and communities trust us as policymakers, as service providers. And because this area, it is a bit of sensitive. Some people, they don't want someone to intervene, interfere between their parenting style and their children. So that is also, we need to build that trust. The issue of stigma was also mentioned as one of the barriers for engagement with parents and communities, because also parents, they don't want to be seen as bad parents. So if they are engaged in any platform, in any activities and interventions with others, they will be seen as bad parents. So they don't want to be put in that place. And also we discussed the barrier of knowledge, because so many parents just, they don't know that how to get engaged and what is they have out there, so they can be part of bigger groups and so on. The addition to that, we have discussed the issue of what to provide, how to reach parents. That is one. And then when we reach them, when we engage with parents and communities, what to provide. Also, colleagues, they mentioned that parents are not always the primary caregivers. We have in many settings nannies and grandparents. They are taking a bigger role in that. And the issue of parent engaging with parents and communities in humanitarian settings as a specific thing. These were the key issues. In terms of recommendations, very quickly, we thought that it's very important to engage the religious leaders and community leaders in this. The region in general is a religious region, so it is important. We discussed the issue of quality of all interventions in terms of engagement or service delivery. This is important. Starting early, engaging parents early, even before they are becoming parents. That was a big key recommendation mentioned here. And as I said, tailoring some interventions towards grandparents and nannies and other caregivers is important. Making use of the workplace. This has come also very strongly that we have, by time so many parents are working, and working is mentioned as a key barrier. So we need to make sure that we reach them through their workplaces and try to facilitate their engagement through that. Also, we recommend to harness the digital approaches, the social media and others, towards engagement of parents, and try to tailor interventions for adolescent parents, not parents of adolescents, but parents who are young. And because we have also big proportion of young parents here, they need to be engaged in different ways rather than in traditional ways where we engage adult parents. We need to have specific platforms to engage adolescent parents. And lastly, we need to also invest in addressing fathers separately than mothers. And we have some research to understand the evidence behind how to reach fathers and what's the difference between reaching fathers and mothers in the engagement platform. This is a summary, very summarized notes of our discussion. Thank you, and back to you.
Thank you all for the wonderful presentations from the groups. This brings us to the last part of our day, which is the closing remarks. And I want to take this opportunity to invite Yami Gao, who is the global lead on the early child development, serving as the Child in Adversity team leader at the United States Agency for International Development. Yami, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. And thank you for your patience with me as I had an alarm mishap this morning. I'm on East Coast time and missed the opening part of the day, but I've really been grateful to be listening in to the remarks and the discussions that have happened once I did join. So thank you again for including me in this discussion. As was mentioned, I'm based with USAID Washington. And parenting is an essential component of numerous U.S. government international development programs and initiatives that serve children and their families. We recognize that parents, together with members of their families and communities, are really the ones that are promoting the safety and well-being of children, even in the face of formidable threats and challenges. And for this reason, our U.S. government advancing protection, protection and care for children in adversity, or APCA for short, strategy, which is our whole of government commitment and approach to investing in the world's most vulnerable children and their families, prioritizes support to families and parenting in all three of its strategic objectives. We prioritize parenting across each strategic objective because we know that children do thrive best in families, and that the quality of parenting practices is a key determinant of every child's ability to develop their cognitive, emotional, and social potential and resilience against adversity. We know that positive parenting skills profoundly affect the life of a child by enhancing nurturing family care and strengthening the protective environment in which children grow. We're really thrilled to be supporting this convening and the previous ones, and to have held our own series of dedicated discussions with individuals across USAID who are interested in parenting, or that we're trying to get interested in parenting throughout this last year. Those discussions have been pretty similar to what you've covered over these last 3 days, which have aimed to deepen colleagues' understanding of what is meant by an evidence-based parenting intervention, to create a forum for exchange on effective parenting programs underway across a variety of contexts, and to recognize the potential of parenting interventions to reach any number of sectoral outcomes of interest. That's been really critical for us, not only around preventing child maltreatment, enhancing child and adolescent development, but also making the case that we can also achieve nutritional and health outcomes of interest through this type of programming. Our APCA strategy starts with the strategic objective of build strong beginnings, and that is underpinned by the premise that sustainable development really depends on the capacity of parents who do have the primary responsibility, as I said, for ensuring the healthy growth and development of their children. And of course, we know that the supports around families are equally as critical. Chief among this work around in our objective 1 of APCA has been our work with WHO and UNICEF to integrate the nurturing care framework, which, as most of you know, promotes responsive care of newborns and young children into our maternal and child health and nutrition programs at USAID. And critically, this work has really required attention and support to the mental health and well-being of parents in order to provide such care. So I do want to really thank our colleagues for their leadership and for all of the work that went into this convening and others before it. It's been really impressive to see the numbers and the discussions that have been taking place. Our Children in Adversity team, which I lead, also coordinates the Global Child Thrive Act, and that is built upon the APCA strategy and its first objective to build strong beginnings. And that law made it the policy of the United States to support inclusive early childhood development into relevant foreign assistance programs. And by inclusive, we mean disability inclusive. In February of this year, we did release USAID implementation guidance for the legislation. It's a practical tool that is intended to assist USAID missions and others across the government, our US government, in enacting the law's requirements and measuring efforts. And it might be informative for implementing partners and even other governments as well. I will pop the guidance into the chat after I finish my remarks here. The guidance does aim to support USAID actors across different sectors in identifying opportunities to enhance our existing programs and platforms across sectors with evidence-based approaches to improve early childhood development outcomes. And primarily, this does focus on how we can reach parents and caregivers with additional support to provide essential care and protection to promote optimal child development, including addressing caregiver well-being and mental health, as I've already said, and importantly, attending to the needs of children with disabilities and their families. The second strategic objective for APCA is to put families first and ensure nurturing and protective family care for those children who are at risk of living outside of family care. And the third is to protect children from violence. We know that parenting is absolutely essential to the accomplishment of both of these objectives as well. And critical to putting families first is an understanding that children thrive best in families, and that to do this, we must invest in parenting and family strengthening. Parenting interventions that support parents to manage household stress and to build positive parent-child relationships, especially in the adolescent years, has been incredibly important to the work, for example, of our US government PEPFAR programming to prevent and respond to HIV/AIDS. Parenting interventions such as Parenting for Lifelong Health, which is one of the evidence-based interventions promoted by the INSPIRE package to end violence, helps build the trusting and open relationships between parents and teenagers that are so important to open dialogue about risks, including HIV/AIDS, or rather HIV and sexual violence. And as these examples show, we do recognize what has been so well articulated in the discussions around elevating parenting and family support today, is that the quality of parenting practices really is that key determinant of every child's ability to develop their cognitive, emotional, and social potential and resilience against adversity. We've been big supporters of the global initiative to support children, to support parenting for this reason. And we see so much value in the types of discussions that you've been having today and this week. In fact, our US government special advisor on children in adversity was in Jordan earlier this year, where she visited the Alan Simpson program, which is that IRC Sesame workshop program that you've heard about. She was able to speak with Alan Simpson project staff and local stakeholders, as well as to meet the Muppets, Jad and Basma. And what she said coming off that trip is that you could see and feel the impact on the lives of vulnerable children and their families. And thanks to the robust research and learning agenda of the program, there's a lot of additional data to back the benefits and importance of investing in children early and throughout childhood, of course. We are updating our APCA strategy this year and plan to launch in 2024 early. And we expect that support to families will continue to feature prominently, given what we know about strong caregiver-child relationships, safe environments, strong child protection systems, play, skill building. We know these are all necessary for children's healthy growth and development. And we're absolutely in agreement that supporting families to protect their children and to manage household stress leads to better parenting, better health outcomes, and increased resilience, both at the family and the community levels. So just thank you very much again for including us in the convening. We really look forward to continuing to collaborate on these bolstered parenting supports. Over.
Thank you so much for the wonderful remarks, and we want to thank you for supporting all the work in regards to parenting interventions. And what this takes me next, the next person to have the remark, that is Ghassan from the Arab Network for Children. Ghassan, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. This is, thank you all, I would say, attendees from different countries of the region. Thank you, speakers, moderators, rapporteurs, champions of translation and IT, all colleagues in the organizing steering committee. A big hug and clap to Katie for a wonderful workshop that she did. And each and every colleague who made these 3 days a successful landmark for GISP in the region and globally, I would say. The regional experiences are tremendous, as was very obvious during the last 3 days, and very rich, I would say. and the need for GISP is overwhelming. Lessons learned from these 3 days for me are the deep dive needed in the following issues. GISP in the multidimensional crisis that the region is facing is very much needed, and this should be built up on research and evidence-based programming. This is one. Second, contextualization according to each country is needed also. That is GISP, the geography of GISP. Third, building on these two, geography and contextualization, more deep dive in the topics of GISP as needed, and will be rational in this case. Thank you all. Thank you for these 3 days, and over to you, Neha. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next closing remarks comes from Neha Kapoor from UNICEF.
Thanks, Binza, and thank you, colleagues, again. Dr. Ghassan, you provided a nice, point for GISP, and I think that's really great. That's really our starting point as well, to say a big thanks to Katie, Sabine, and the team at GISP, the extended group, including Parenting for Lifelong Health, the Global Partnership, IGNAD, etc. I think we've received a lot of support and guidance, and I think all the partners have needed it. Definitely, Dr. Ghassan, thank you to you and your team as well for all the collaboration. It's been great, and the support as well to pull things through. It's been great to work with the WHO team, and I think Khalid, Hala, Anarita, and the IT team, thanks for that. In UNICEF, I do want to make a special acknowledgement to our colleagues, Aferdita, Mohammed, Maha, who's not on the call anymore, Stephanie, and our colleague, our designer, Diane, who helped us with all the back-end work. At UNICEF, as you know, parenting outreach, engagement, and supportive intervention and service deliveries are very much undergirding all of our programmatic and humanitarian work across in all of the countries of the region. We recognize the multiple influences that parents and stresses that parents experience, and so have quite a few frameworks, guidances, and tools that we can also share with all of you, as also learn from you in terms of what works. I think for us in UNICEF, and just based on these 3 days, what's clear is this huge need to continue a sort of momentum going forward of all of the partners coming together. And really, how we will do this is the big question now for us. How do we take this forward is important. I did, from our perspective, note a few things that I thought were really important that came across, in terms of the lessons. I think that there's a lot of emphasis on the idea of, parenting for adolescents. There's not a lot of work here, and this is really crucial for the MENA region. I've mentioned this before as well. We have a substantial population in this region that's transitioning into adolescence or youth. And employment, of course, remains a big concern, but I think it creates a lot of stress for young people in terms of where they want to go and what they want to do, and in turn creates stress for parents. There's a lot that they're dealing with, and so this is an area, I think, of focus for us. The other areas are evidence generation and investing for evidence, sharing experiences, models of what work is really one crying need I think we hear from the 3 days. And lastly, I thought fathers' engagement was another very, very crucial point that kept coming up repeatedly over the 3 days. And fathers' engagement, particularly in the context of MENA, where we heard a lot of different views on how to engage them and the need to engage them. So just some points from our side, but really been great to be a part of this and to be a part of the big steering committee working on this. So look forward to our continued interactions. Thank you, and back to you, Binza.
Thank you so much, Neha, for all the good work and the good comments. This brings me to our last remark from Asmus Americh from the World Health Organization. Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues, and it's a great pleasure to be at least for some time with you on this event. And stepping in for Maha, who's my dear colleague, of course, on the same floor in the building of WHO EMRO in Cairo. Just about myself, I'm covering NCDs and mental health with my team, and of course, Khalid and Wafa and many others have been involved. So we're very happy to triangulate our input a little bit from WHO EMRO. And from what I have been able to join with you, in the last couple of days, I think this has been really cross-agency, cross-organization, also cross-departmental, as I just mentioned, and also cross-levels. Certainly for me, it has been truly educational. I've been in public and global health for a while, but this is actually the first event on this particular subject. So this this has to be continued. And it certainly has a lot of repercussions on the mental health work that we do, as Khalid mentioned, and also other colleagues. So it was my pleasure to be here with my team in this event, and I hope that we will continue, especially in our region, for all the reasons mentioned. And in the region we live and work in, of course, there remain marked disparities between and within countries, with a number of countries, in fact, almost half of our countries in the demarcations of the Eastern Mediterranean region that are experiencing complex and protracted humanitarian emergencies with a high proportion of children, adolescents, and large-scale internal displacement and migration. And all these issues have serious consequences on our country's ability to deliver on global and regional development goals and humanitarian agendas. On top of that, the recent COVID pandemic highlighted the challenges posed to parents and caregivers of children and adolescents across the world. And on the one hand, and brought increased focus on parenting skills as a resource for population well-being, national development, and security on the other. I therefore feel that it's very timely that we're organizing this event at this moment in time, and to capitalize on the momentum to foster the development and scaling of national evidence-based parenting support policies, programs, and platforms that promote enabling environments for health and well-being of children. I'm delighted to see that this regional convening has brought together this broad range of stakeholders across our region involved in early childhood and development, mental health, violence against children, to identify effective strategies, evidence-based practices, and innovative solutions that can empower parents and optimize the development outcomes of our children. Moreover, I'm convinced that this meeting, which I understand is part of a series of regional efforts, provided a platform for sharing knowledge on evidence-based parenting initiatives and examples of good practice and dialogue to identify effective strategies, practices, and innovative solutions that can empower parents and optimize the development outcomes of their children. And that's very much true for our area of work also, the NCDs and mental illnesses, of course. I hope that this meeting will be a catalyst for further collaboration between public, private, civil society stakeholders and researchers and donors alike across sectors to foster universal access to parenting and caregiver support so that every child and adolescent can receive the support they need to achieve their full potential. It is my firm belief that if we join hands to strengthen the work with governments and partners to advocate for the social, mental, and physical well-being of patients and parents, and influence the development and adoption of evidence-based policies, it will help scale up parental support interventions with commensurate resources. It's time to act now. Let me also reiterate our commitment to work collaboratively to further this agenda, and to thank all the distinguished speakers, experts, and participants who have joined us during these 3 days of the convening. Many thanks go to all the colleagues in HQ, both I think in all the agencies really, in UNICEF and in our agency WHO, but also the bilaterals, USAID, the Global Initiative to Support Parents, Parenting for Lifelong Health, the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children, the Early Childhood Development Action Network, and others. So we're really a big family here working together. And I would like to highly commend the great efforts made by all the members of this regional network and organizing committee including the colleagues, of course, here at the regional level in MENA and what we call EMRO, but also the Arab Network for Childhood, Early Childhood Development Pediatrics units of Sultan Qaboos University in Muscat, Oman, the School of Behavioral Sciences and Mental Health, our collaborating center in Iran, the National Family Safety Program in Saudi Arabia, and Save the Children and other international NGOs. So it's really a long list. Some of the partners are relatively new to me, and I'm enthused about all the resources we have here together really in this region. So finally, I'm hopeful that the outcomes of this and other regional convening and subsequent global summits, which I believe are in the pipeline, will culminate in every family being supported in their caregiving practices, and that children or adolescents receive the support that they need. And I'm particularly keen to see that happening and to witness that, of course, in the 10 or 11 countries in our region that are currently in complex emergency, where I believe this is even most needed. I thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, everybody. This brings us almost to the last bit of the day, and we have wrapped it all well, and I don't have anything to say from my side. I just want to wish everybody a lovely evening wherever you are, and we are going to leave a 3-minute interfaith media message on parenting. Thank you all.
بشكل دائم عم نشوف معاناة للمرأة نتيجة فشل في الحياة الزوجية ومحاولة تجديد حياتها بطريقة مختلفة لحتى تقدر تكون عندها حصانة وحتى ما تخضع للابتزاز وحتى ما تكون ضعيفة أمام مواجهة المجتمع. من هون نحن بنقول إنه البنت بهذا الزمن هي أكثر حاجة إلى التحصين العلمي حتى تمتلك سلاح المواجهة. بدنا نطلع من فكرة إنه دائما البنت أنت حلمك لازم يكون كيف تتزوجي. لازم نأكد على البنت لا، حلمك كيف تبدعي، كيف تعطي إنتاجية في الحياة، كيف تكوني إنسانة تتركي بصمة بمجتمعك تفيد هذا المجتمع، كيف تكوني رائدة، كيف تكوني اسم وعنوان. الإنسان إنسان، والمفروض ننظره مش كونه ذكر أو أنثى، المفروض ننظره قديش هو عنده قدرات وقابليات وذكاء وطاقات نقدر إنه نخليه يستخرجها لحتى يخدم نفسه وشخصيته والمجتمع اللي هو عايش فيه. من هون نحن بنقول ركزوا على الطاقات الإبداعية عند بناتكم. بناتكم في عندهم كثير من الذكاء، عندهم أكثر من فقط ناحية الأمومة، عندهم طاقات إبداعية، خلوهم يعبروا عنها، لا تقتلوها فيهم. وبنفس الوقت ما تنظروا إلى جنس الولد، شوفوا قديش طاقاته وحاولوا أن تنصفوا في طاقاته وفي إنتاجيته، مش إنه تكون الذكرية أو الأنثوية هي الحالة اللي تنظروا من خلالها لهذا الولد.
Thank you to all the participants and presenters and all who worked many months to make this happen. Thank you to all the governments who sent even 60 participants from some countries. Thank you to the implementers who shared their experiences. And thank you to everyone for overcoming our organizational boundaries and really working to collaborate together to bring this momentum forward. So feel free. We have a few minutes before the event ends. If anyone wants to say their thoughts or chats or any thoughts about momentum into the plenary, feel free to share your thoughts before our wonderful IT colleagues who have been the backbone before they end the meeting.
Thank you all. Have a lovely day wherever you are. This is the end. It brings us to the end of the plenary and the end of the 3 days. We really enjoyed having you on board. Thank you.